Hello, everyone. This is Megan Elaine, Project Associate for the Kidney Health Initiative, and welcome to today's informational webinar about the Kidney Pediatric Accelerator Trial Clearinghouse Pilot Program, also referred to as Kidney Patch. As announced, all attendees are muted. You are welcome to submit questions throughout the webinar via the questions pane in your attendee control panel on the right side of the screen. Please keep in mind today's webinar will be recorded for distribution purposes in the future. Joining me today is also Melissa West, Project Director for the Kidney Health Initiative. I'd like to start off by welcoming Dr. Raymond Harris, who is starting his term as the Kidney Health Initiative Co-Chair.
Well, good day, everyone, and welcome to our webinar announcing Kidney Patch. Today, we're very excited to share information on the pilot program to facilitate the coordination of pediatric trials. During our webinar today, we do invite you to interact with the team and ask questions about the Kidney Patch program, as Megan indicated. And at this time, I'd like to thank and introduce Dr. William Schnaffer, Chair of the Kidney Patch Implementation Committee, to kick off our webinar.
Thank you, Ray. And first, I do want to take a moment out to thank everyone for taking the time out of their busy schedules to learn more about this program that we're launching. You will hear more about the implementation committee later, but since I'm introduced as its chair, I thought I'd say at the outset that the committee is tasked with carrying out a plan developed over a year by a much larger committee that was representing a broad spectrum of stakeholders in North America and Europe. We welcome your feedback on this program as we're designing it to be useful to everyone who's participating today. So again, please use that Q&A feature located on the right side of your screen for any questions that you have. And we'll hold them, but we'll address them in the later part of the seminar. In addition to that, the slides are going to be available after today's webinar on the KHI website, which is www.kidneyhealthinitiative.org. Should you have any questions after today's webinar, just please feel free to reach out via email to any of the contacts who are listed on that last slide of our presentation. Okay, so with that, today's agenda will include, first of all, what is KHI itself, an overview of the KHI project, some information, and of course, the introduction of the Kidney Patch program itself, and then opportunity for audience questions, answers, and comments, and finally, what the next steps are going to be. You also, in addition to me, you'll be hearing from a few other members of our implementation committee, including Dr. Alicia New from Johns Hopkins University, who also represents the North American Pediatric Renal Trials and Collaborative Studies, which you may have heard of as Nephrology, and also Dr. Michelle Rowe from the University of Minnesota, who in addition represents the Midwest Pediatric Nephrology Consortium. So the next slide shows the Kidney Health Initiative, again, or KHI, which was established in 2012 as a public-private partnership between the American Society of Nephrology, which I'll refer to as the ASN after this, and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. KHI is comprised of over 90 members, which includes stakeholders from patient organizations, research organizations, pharmaceutical and biotechnology companies, device manufacturers, dialysis providers, and U.S. government agencies. Slide 3 shows the mission of KHI, which, and I'm sort of reading here, is to advance scientific understanding of the kidney health and patient safety implications of new and existing medical products, to foster the development of therapies for disease that affects the kidney by creating a collaborative environment in which the FDA and the greater nephrology community can interact to optimize the evaluation of drugs, devices, biologics, and food products with the goal of accelerating our ability to help people with kidney disease. Next slide. KHI has 5 strategic priority areas, which are shown in this circle that you see here, that include enhancing clinical trial infrastructure and developing an evidence base to support that, encouraging partnerships with patients and families, improved understanding of biomarkers and disease pathogenesis, closer collaboration with the FDA and other government agencies, and enhancing clinical trial endpoint and design ideas. So these 5 areas were identified as topics wherein the kidney care community could collaborate pre-competitively to promote the development of new treatments and improve the quality of life of people living with kidney disease. So at this point, I'd now like to introduce Dr. Alicia New, who will review our KHI project that has led us to develop the kidney patch program. Alicia?
Thanks, Bill. Next slide. I think many in the audience are aware that the development of new treatments, drugs, devices for children lags behind that of the development in adults. And this is multifactorial and is influenced in part by societal or ethical issues with conducting primary drug research in children. Unfortunately, in our effort to protect our children, that means then that children with diseases may not have access to devices or medications, and or they may be treated with medications or devices that have not been tested in children. In addition, most diseases, and particularly kidney disease in children, are rare conditions, and therefore there are a small number of patients, and those patients are dispersed throughout various treatment facilities. Even the largest pediatric nephrology center may have only a handful of children with a specific disease at that center. In addition, there's a need for novel approaches to assuring efficacy and safety. The patient population ranges from infants to adolescents who may be fully adult size, excuse me, and developing a medication that can be delivered to that wide range of patients can present specific problems or issues. Next slide. So the current state of drug development in children, I get the next, is shown on this slide. You have the industry sponsor, next slide, who has to work with regulatory agencies, the FDA in the US and the EMA in Europe. And those agencies are not always aligned in their requirements or in their priorities for drug and device development. When conducting or are trying to develop agents for children, those industry sponsors need to work with consultants. So the next click. Consultants in order to get a sense for the number of children that may be affected, the ability to enroll patients, and in study design. And in order to do that, they reach out to consultants. They try to access databases of registries and prior trials, and they may engage a CRO to assess feasibility and execution. Unfortunately, the access, you can go back, access to those consultants' registries is not necessarily transparent or easily accessible. So those consultants may not be easily accessible. Those registries may not be easily accessible. And CROs may not always have expertise in pediatric trials. Now you can go to the next slide. So the overcoming barriers to drug development in children with CKD was launched in 2016 with the following aims, and I'll read these: to recognize the legal remit and regulatory framework for pediatric study plans in the US and Europe, outline the current avenues of collaboration and communication between the regulatory agencies in the US and Europe regarding pediatric plans. 2 is to explore avenues for harmonization of study designs and timelines for pediatric plans across the agencies. Next slide. Can I get Project Aim 3 is to develop a mechanism to prioritize drugs and drug classes for trials in children with CKD through multi-stakeholder guidance and input. 4 is optimize planning of pediatric drug trials by enabling feasibility assessment in terms of the available patient populations through data sharing and access to CKD pediatric registries, consultation on designs and protocols by a panel of pediatric nephrologists, trialists, and patient representatives early in the design process, and enhance the likelihood of successful trial execution through assessment of the capacities of various pediatric renal clinical trial organizations. And finally, 5, to identify key considerations for a balanced assessment of perceived benefits and risks, including toxicity, through collaboration with experts. So kidney patch was really developed primarily out of AIM 3 and 4. And although we do believe that patients and care partners' perspectives on the core of the kidney patch program, and they have been involved throughout this process. Next slide. So I think Michelle is going to take it from here to discuss the kidney patch program.
All right, so thank you, Alicia. As Alicia mentioned, to address Project AIMS 3 and 4, an implementation committee was charged to establish an organizational entity that will help optimize planning and implementation of therapeutic trials in children with chronic kidney disease. Over the past year, we've developed a plan for a new entity we call the Kidney Patch, which stands for Pediatric Accelerator Trial Clearinghouse. Currently, there's a lack of coordination among pediatric clinical trial networks, registries, biobanks, and disease-specific researchers and organizations throughout the U.S. and Europe. The Kidney Patch aims to bring all of these entities together under one umbrella. The Kidney Patch will interface with industry sponsors to provide streamlined access to information necessary to plan and implement clinical trials in children with chronic kidney disease. In addition, the Kidney Patch will act to advise regulatory agencies on unmet needs and prioritization for drug development in the pediatric CKD space. Next slide, please. The goals of Kidney Patch are to enable feasibility assessment of the available patient populations through data sharing and access to pediatric CKD registries. For example, if a sponsor wants to do a study in children with pediatric membranous nephropathy and wants an estimate of prevalence, the current status is that they may email all of the sites they or their CRO is aware of and ask them to fill out a feasibility assessment. This leads to duplication of work, as myself and my colleagues at the same institution are often getting the same feasibility assessments. They also may miss large sites that just aren't on their radar. The Kidney Patch would help to put the sponsor in touch with people within the pediatric nephrology community who may already have that data available. For example, we may know of a network that already has recruited a large cohort of membranous patients retrospectively for other purposes. If the data isn't readily available within the pediatric nephrology community, and it may not be, then we can provide options to obtain that data through existing networks. A second goal of Kidney Patch is to facilitate centralized coordination with the various pediatric clinical trial networks and other stakeholder organizations within the U.S. and Europe. There are a number of pediatric trial and clinical research networks, each with a unique position within the pediatric nephrology space, but they have some overlap as well, which makes it challenging for those outside the community to know how to best utilize each one to meet the needs of a sponsor. The Kidney Patch aims to help a sponsor understand which network or networks may best fit their needs. And the third goal of Kidney Patch is to assist with identification of expertise that can provide consultation on pediatric study planning. While anyone can use PubMed to find out who's published in a specific area within pediatric nephrology, we can help a sponsor find the individuals with the clinical trial and topic expertise that they're looking for. Because we're a small community, we're aware of all the rare disease registries and other data sources that may be out there. Next slide. The figure on this slide represents how we established the Kidney Patch program and are facilitating our pilot process. First, we convened a work group of diverse experts in pediatric nephrology to establish our project work group. Then a charter was drafted to guide the operations of our pilot program. This charter was then circulated to global pediatric kidney organizations to obtain feedback on our proposed program. Following the feedback we received on the charter, we established an implementation committee to begin developing the Kidney Patch program and to prepare the launch of the pilot program. We announced the launch of the pilot program at ASN Kidney Week in 2018 and began accepting applications. And to date, we have received one application for pre-protocol development and plan to announce Kidney Patch as a standing entity at the ASPN PAS meeting coming up in April 2019. Next slide. So during the pilot, which we're in now, the application process for the Kidney Patch program is relatively simple, and it's as follows. A sponsor submits an application. The application is then received by KHI, and a confirmation email sent to the applicant upon receipt. You can keep clicking through these. The application is then sent to the implementation committee, which reviews it and matches the request with available data, networks, or expertise. And then finally, the implementation committee provides a detailed information back to the sponsor based on their initial request within 5 to 10 days. And we expect the implementation committee is made up of people with a wide variety of pediatric nephrology expertise, with a pretty good understanding of the available information within nephrology. Next slide. So we hope to achieve the following outcomes from the Kidney Patch Project. We would like to serve as a contact for interested stakeholders, to be able to connect developers with trialists and sources of data and subjects, and to identify expertise for consultation to improve the ability to perform clinical trials in children with CKD. We would like to provide accurate estimates of the available patient populations. We believe this is crucial for accurate trial design. Next slide. And next slide. We'd like to identify and encourage novel approaches to optimize the conduct of pediatric trials, and we'll do this through working together among various organizations and stakeholders. Next slide. We would like to facilitate needs assessment and prioritization, and to coordinate among various groups that are working towards these goals. Next slide. So next, I'll hand it back to Dr. Bill Schnapper.
Thank you, Michelle. With this now, next, go ahead and click. So the first, we'd like to spread the word. So we envision this as being the first of a number of webinars, presentations. We've already submitted abstracts to various meetings, both in the United States and Europe. And we would like to share information and invite comments. And we hope that those of you who are participating today can help us with that, not only by commenting, but also by sharing our information with your colleagues. Next. So our plan of operations then will be, we've established preliminary procedures for developing and providing information. As you've heard, we've had one submission, and we are both using this to provide a service and also using it to clarify our procedures, because since we're just getting going with this, to be straightforward about it, we're finding that we have to modify our initial plans based on what the needs are of the people who are requesting the service from us. So we're addressing practical issues involving formats, communications, and cost. And we do think that maybe down the road, in addition to CKD, we may eventually provide this service for other diseases. And just to emphasize the problems that Alicia raised and Michelle proposed to address, one of the things that is very clear is some of those multiple arrows create confusion, disinformation, and slow things down. What we like to do is be essentially a nexus for this communication so that we can promote clarity and the ability to do all these things, for everyone to do all these things with a minimum of wasted time. In order to do that, though, it's very important that we have the buy-in of the great majority of the people, both in industry and at the level of the patients. So in any event, now we're conducting a trial run with sponsor requests and analyzing how it works and working on improving that. Next, we will, once we have all of our procedures worked out, establish a final entity that will be the entity that will run this program longer term. And we plan to introduce this entity at a symposium at the 2019 American Society of Pediatric Nephrology Pediatric Academic Societies meeting in Baltimore at the end of April of this year. So we have a fast track now that this plan is laid out, and we hope with your participation and collaboration that we can get this moving forward. Next slide, please. I just would like to mention, thank especially, first of all, Alicia and Michelle for their presentations. Mention the implementation committee that you see here that has been working on developing the actual sort of boots on the ground concept here. And also the efforts of that larger committee that developed this plan. And I especially would like to thank all of the attendees for participating in this webinar. And with that, I'd like to open this webinar up to any questions that the other people participating in the call might have.
Great, thanks, Phil. So I did receive our first question, and that question is, how will confidentiality be maintained of the information in the application?
Okay, so initially we are committed to maintaining confidentiality with and that is a part of our charter, with the people who who make the request from us. The information will be shared with whoever we contact, and we will do that in an iterative manner. For instance, so we won't be sending out a broadcast email to everyone saying such and such an entity has asked us to investigate the availability of people to participate in a study, but rather we will identify a single person and bring that person in. And in addition to that, there obviously will be some information that will be conveyed in the request, but we will do our best not to pass along a minimum of information involved with that. I'd like to ask Michelle and Alicia, who have had experience with these sort of requests before, how you've handled it at your organizations.
Michelle, do you want? This is Alicia New. So we had actually discussed this as a group because clearly once you get into the trial design, there may need to be confidentiality agreements signed. The early process is very high level, and in order to apply for this process, you don't need to include that information. We only want a general idea of what you're interested in and what services you want. We would then direct you to the appropriate people or networks with whom you could develop or have CDA signed. So this group would not typically see the confidential information. We wouldn't necessarily need that in order to get you to the appropriate people. Michelle, did you want to?
Yeah, I would echo that. I would say the kidney patch is acting in a matchmaker process, and once that match is made, then the confidentiality agreements would be worked out with the individual identified.
Now, I will say one of the things that we hope to do is kind of keep a list of the studies that are being done or have been done, so that we can not reinvent the wheel. So if medication X is being applied to condition Y, knowing that is happening may influence a subsequent application. But again, that only once the process got to a point where that information could be shared with KHI would we know it. And certainly this isn't meant to be a gateway. We're not going to discourage drug development, but we feel that it's important for the community to know if there are other studies in process, because if it's a relatively rare condition, the ability to enroll patients is going to be greatly impaired. And no one wants to invest the time, energy, and money to develop a study if the patients aren't there.
Great, thank you for that. Our next question is, what are the benefits of using this program?
So, this is Alicia New again. I think the idea is that many of you may have relationships with pediatric nephrologists, or you may have worked with a network in the past. And so if you have a new medication, you can go back to those contacts. But those contacts may or may not be the right group for this other medication. And there may be other groups out there that could be equally as helpful or may provide different expertise. So what we're hoping to develop is a transparent way for industry to be able to approach the pediatric nephrology community as a whole and identify the resources, the appropriate resources, so that you can develop the most effective study, the study that is going to actually get the information you want, be able to enroll patients, and identify centers without having to rely on the people that you may or may not have met or you heard about someone from someone. As Michelle mentioned, we're a pretty small community, and so we know each other and we work well together. And our goal as the pediatric nephrology community is to get these studies done and get them done well. It doesn't serve any of us if the studies get launched and we can't recruit patients. So, the benefit is that you have access to the entire pediatric nephrology community. Again, it's focused right now in the U.S. and Europe, but we have, as a group, have talked about how, we also have colleagues in other countries. And IPNA, the International Pediatric Nephrology Association, is aware of the project and is fully supportive. So, there is the potential to expand globally. Michelle and Bill, do you want to?
I think I'd like to add one thing, which is in addition to accomplishing the study, since we propose to be able to actually identify how many patients there are in the community available for a study. Let's say someone comes to us and says, we need 50 patients with a particular rare disease and to do this trial, and we come back by saying, well, there are only 20. I think it provides an element of information that can be used to modify or reassess what could be done to design the study in the first place.
And this is Melissa West. I just wanted to add that, obviously is the benefit in the title of the program is clearinghouse. So the more that we can serve as kind of this first line for the community, the more we'll have a better sense of kind of what is being done as it relates to trials and who is doing them. So again, we're getting to that concept of the efficiency, not only putting you in touch with the right people as quick as possible, but also kind of helping you figure out how to navigate what they may also have on their plate. That's the idea of this clearinghouse.
And we're not suggesting that, if you do have relationships with individuals and organizations, that there will be any requirement for you to abandon those. We really are just trying to facilitate these studies. So it may be that, you come forward with a project and you have some identified consultants, and this group may say, that's great. You might consider this consultant or this group, but you are not in any way obligated to do that. We really are we're trying to facilitate the process. And again, remain transparent and try to keep track of the work that's being done in this space.
But by including us, even if you do know other people, it helps us keep track of what studies are underway and how many patients might remain available.
And I would just echo that it's truly our goal to make it easier for sponsors to perform clinical trials in children. And we know this is difficult. We've all had experiences with trials that haven't been successful in the past. And we just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to optimize drug development.
All right. Thank you for that. So we received another question. What are the costs of using kidney patch? And if it's free for now, do you anticipate that there will be costs in the future?
That's an excellent question, and we have not resolved it. It is our hope that we can provide this service at minimal cost. The only issue for us would be in the long run how we would sustain providing the service. And we're exploring a number of different models for that. So we can't say that there will never be a cost. For the present, there is no cost, and we'll have to see how that goes.
There is no cost for the pilot, though.
And I would just add that individuals and networks may have costs associated with the services that they're providing. But the kidney patch process itself, there's no cost for the pilot.
Yes, matchmaking services are no cost.
Our next question is, how will the assessment of number of patients for a particular trial be determined? Is that within this initiative scope?
No, again, I think we would match you with a group that would be able to provide that information, a group or a group of individuals, because again, depending on the condition, there may be not a formal network or group that has worked on it, but there may be a group of individuals with expertise who would have access to that group. We would like to compile the requests that have come through. So I think Michelle gave the example of membranous. So if someone was looking at a trial in patients with membranous, and then several years later or a few years later, a similar trial was proposed, we would like to be able to reach out to the groups that responded to the first one, and perhaps this group would provide that information, or that group would provide it again. So, but because it had been done before, you wouldn't be starting from scratch.
Just to add, I got a text from Katrin Ulig, who had a significant role in helping us design this, and she points out that over time, as we establish this process and it continues to go on, we will start amassing information about what's doable in pediatric kidney disease treatment. And that body of information could actually prove very useful in the long run as a way of informing regulatory agencies, or at least getting them to understand what some of the issues are in conducting pediatric clinical trials.
Right. So the idea is if this process can consistently provide a reliable and unbiased estimate of a patient population or the feasibility of a study, that information then may carry more weight when you go back to the regulatory agencies. This process determined, as the example Bill gave, that there really are only 20 patients with this. That information will be viewed as unbiased and credible because it went through this process.
Our next question is, will this program identify and train new pediatric nephrologists to be investigators?
Go on.
Go ahead, Bill. I'm sorry. This program, our goal is to do that. I think that the individual networks are seeking to do that, and identifying and supporting pediatric nephrologists in order so that they can contribute to that. I don't think it's within the scope of Kidney Patch, but certainly I think it's a desire of the pediatric nephrology community to engage more and more people. But the one thing that Kidney Patch can do is help identify nephrologists who are interested in performing these projects, either through a previous network or not. It's a mechanism to be able to identify people who are interested in and able to do these studies.
There are a number of initiatives right now going on in the broader kidney community, at the ASPN and elsewhere. And I think that the desire of everyone to get this done will lead to an integrated effort to do this, and that's underway. But as Alicia said, it's not a part of Kidney Patch.
Our next question is, will there be an opportunity for feedback to regulatory agencies to allow negotiation or modification of pediatric requirements based on Kidney Patch assessments of feasibility?
Well, that's a question that we just addressed. I think that it's not our official role at this point, but we think that that's a very important long-term outcome of this effort.
And again, FDA is obviously involved in KHI, and they are very supportive of this process. They of course are not obligated to make changes based on any recommendations that come through this process. But our hope, as Bill said, and as Katrine pointed out, if this process can consistently provide unbiased and credible information that justifies the modification of a plan, we would hope that would result in increasing influence over the regulatory agencies.
Our next question is, where do I submit an application for the pilot program?
Do you want to answer that, Megan?
Sure. You can find the application on the Kidney Health Initiative website, which is just kidneyhealthinitiative.org. It will actually be under the Pediatric Trials dropdown and it also can be found on the project page for the pediatric work group. So it's under Take Action and then Pediatric Trials, and there's a link to the application on there. All right. So our next question is, how will I make the decision on which trial network would be best for me to use for my trial?
Michelle, you want to take that one?
Sure. So the members of the implementation committee participate in a number of the different trial networks. So we have a very good understanding of the capabilities and kind of past performance of each of our networks. So our goal as the Kidney Patch will be to match you with the network that we think would be best suited to answer the questions or to complete the trial. And sometimes it may be that more than one, if you're looking for a very large trial, for example, utilizing both Midwest Peds Nephrology Consortium and Nephrology might be the right answer. If there's a specific niche disease that you're looking at that one has more experience with, then we may send you to one or the other. So we'll be using just our knowledge about how these organizations run to really give you what you're looking for. The more information that you are able to give us about what exactly you need, the better we'll be able to match you with an entity that can best serve your purposes.
And again, I want to encourage you that Michelle mentioned it and Bill's mentioned it. Most of us on the implementation committee and most of us in pediatric nephrology are involved in multiple of these. We really are a very collaborative group, and we really are that we as individual pediatric nephrologists, we as individual networks, and we as the pediatric community are passionate about this project because we would really like to optimize the outcomes of these trials. As I said before, it doesn't serve anyone if a trial gets done with my network or someone else's network and we're not able to recruit enough patients. So we really are trying to match you with a group or groups of people that are going to make sure that the study gets done correctly. And I will echo what Michelle said. The more information you give us, the better that will be. And we are going to go into this in good faith. If the request goes to a group and it's clear that additional services or different services are needed, we as a community, are in agreement that we will engage other groups or other people to try to make sure the studies happen.
Great. Thanks for that. Do we have any? I have no additional questions, I believe. Do we have any additional closing comments from the panelists?
I would just say that we're very excited to get this pilot project underway, and we look forward to collaborating with as many of you as possible in the future.
Yes, just to add one thing to what Alicia just said a moment ago, since many of us are members of many different pediatric trial organizations, in some cases, we're not really referring you to a different group of people or to a different expertise. The decision we're making often has to do with the way that a particular consortium is set up and how that might best fulfill the needs that you have for your project. So again, it's more a matter of just trying to help smooth the way. And I hope that you can appreciate from the comments that we're making is that this actually is not our just trying to create a device, but we are literally looking for a way to optimize our ability to care for our patients. And for that reason, anything we can do to help and to make this work is absolutely critical. So your comments, involvement, and recruiting your colleagues into this are all very important to us. So if there are no other comments, then I guess we could bring this to a close. So I'd like to thank, again, everyone who has joined in this. This is this last slide here. You can contact me, Melissa, or Megan if you have any questions or issues. Please look forward to an email with the recording and PowerPoint presentation. And I think on that email, we'll also include instructions again written down of what Megan just said a moment ago about how to access the application. You're invited to continue to submit additional questions to us. Please feel free to share any of this information with your colleagues. Any resources regarding Kidney Patch are available, again, at www.kidneyhealthinitiative.org. And I appreciate all of you taking the time to learn more about Kidney Patch, and hope that you can help us contribute to the future of this program. And with that, have a great day.